WNBA and the Indiana Fever did not want people to know that Caitlin Clark was going to be out for the season. I can tell you, from the very day that they decided to let that go public, everything has dropped off a cliff.
The WNBA is in full panic mode. Ever since Caitlin Clark went down, ratings have crashed, fans have tuned out, and now reports say the league is pressuring the Indiana Fever to play in Atlanta just to save face. But why Atlanta, and why does the league look desperate without its biggest star? Caitlin Clark's rookie season was supposed to be the story of the year, but instead it turned into a nightmare that shook the entire league, because first came a quad strain in May, then a groin injury in June, then another groin issue in July, followed by a bone bruise in her ankle, and each time fans thought she'd be back, the injuries kept piling up until the Indiana Fever had no choice but to shut her down for the rest of the season. And that one decision didn't just hurt the team, it ripped the heart out of the WNBA's momentum. Because overnight, the star who filled arenas and carried television broadcasts was gone. And without her, the numbers started crashing and the excitement started fading, leaving the league scrambling to figure out how to survive even a single month without the player who had become bigger than the game itself.
People were trying to hang on to the possibility this whole time. Look, so many people stayed engaged with the team because they thought the cavalry was coming. She's coming back. We're going to have a fighting chance to win the WNBA championship. The Indiana Fever and the WNBA, they knew this.
The second Caitlin Clark disappeared from the court, the WNBA's ratings went with her, because the numbers don't lie. Before her injury, national broadcasts were hitting millions of viewers. ABC's primetime game against the Liberty even peaked at nearly 3 million, but the moment she was gone, the bottom fell out. Reports show viewership dropped by more than 50% across the board. The All-Star game without Clark lost over 1 million viewers compared to the year before, and even regular season matchups that were supposed to be marquee events suddenly looked like ghost towns on television. Fans weren't tuning in, sponsors were nervous, and media execs were asking the same question everyone else was asking. If one rookie is gone and half the audience disappears, what does that say about the league's stability? Because the truth is clear. The WNBA is living and dying by Caitlin Clark's presence, and without her, they're scrambling for solutions that are starting to look desperate. Behind the scenes, the WNBA isn't just worried, it's panicking, because every network that paid big money to broadcast games this season did so with one name in mind: Caitlin Clark. ESPN, ABC, Amazon Prime, they didn't buy the WNBA as a whole. They bought the Caitlin Clark effect. They bought the guarantee that millions would tune in every time she touched the ball. And when she went down, those promises evaporated overnight. Executives who had been celebrating record-breaking ratings were suddenly staring at charts showing viewership sliced in half. And in the world of television, that's not just disappointing, that's catastrophic. Sponsors feel the same way. Companies lined up to attach their names to Clark, to put her face on commercials, jerseys, and billboards. They weren't investing in the league, they were investing in her. Without her, the value of those deals nosedives. And now, the WNBA is under pressure from all sides, from networks demanding better ratings, from advertisers expecting the buzz they were sold, and from fans threatening to walk away if Clark isn't part of the product. That's why the league is starting to look desperate, floating ideas, and making decisions that feel less like sports strategy and more like survival tactics. Rumors are spreading that the WNBA is pushing the Indiana Fever to stage games in Atlanta, not because it makes sense competitively, but because it's a bigger market, a flashier venue, and maybe the only way they think they can stop the bleeding. Atlanta isn't Indiana. It doesn't have the same loyal fan base, it doesn't have the Fever's identity, but it does have something the league is chasing: television optics. To the WNBA, this isn't about the Fever anymore, it's about keeping the cameras rolling, the sponsors paying, and the headlines alive, even if it means rewriting the rules. And this is where fans start asking the uncomfortable question: is the league actually putting the game second and business first? Because when the WNBA forces a team like the Fever into these situations, it isn't just about selling tickets. It's about trying to convince the world that the show is still worth watching without the one player everyone came to see. But that wasn't the whole story. This is where the story takes a wild turn, because as soon as the ratings collapse became undeniable, whispers started flying that the WNBA was pressuring the Indiana Fever to play games in Atlanta. Not Indianapolis, not their home arena, Atlanta. And at first, it sounded ridiculous. Why would the league uproot a franchise in the middle of a season? But the more people dug into it, the more it started to make a strange kind of sense. Atlanta has a bigger market footprint, more corporate sponsorship opportunities, and a stronger media presence than Indianapolis. To the league, it's the kind of city you showcase when you're desperate to prove you can still pull in attention without your superstar. Fans online started piecing it together. The timing of the ratings collapse, the rumors of scheduling changes, and the league's history of bending its own rules whenever it suits the business. Reddit threads blew up with claims like, "This is classic WNBA panic, they know Clark is gone and they're trying to find a quick fix." Others speculated the league wanted to test the waters in Atlanta to see if it could become a future expansion hub, using the Fever as the guinea pig. Of course, no official statement confirmed any of this. The league stayed quiet, the Fever kept their heads down, and the media danced around the rumor without touching it directly. But the silence only added fuel to the fire. Because in sports, when something doesn't make sense on paper, people start connecting the dots themselves. And those dots painted a picture of a league scrambling to manufacture hype-moving games to a bigger city, hoping the optics would hide the deeper problem. The irony, though, is that fans weren't fooled. On social media, frustration exploded. Fever supporters felt betrayed at even the suggestion that their team could be forced out of Indiana. WNBA purists blasted the league for chasing markets instead of building loyalty. And critics outside the sport mocked the desperation, saying the league was proving it couldn't survive without one player. And here's the twist. Whether the Atlanta rumor is true or not almost doesn't matter. What matters is that people believed it because it felt plausible. The league's credibility is so fragile right now that even the wildest rumors stick. And when your survival depends on public trust, the last thing you want is for fans to think you're capable of rewriting the rules in the middle of the season just to chase television ratings. But as fans fumed, something else was happening on the court. While the league scrambled to deal with the ratings disaster, the Indiana Fever found themselves caught in the middle of a storm they didn't create. This was a team built around Caitlin Clark, not just on the court, but in the business model, the marketing plan, the entire identity of the franchise. When Clark went down, it wasn't just a basketball setback. It was like pulling the power cord on the entire operation. And yet, the Fever didn't fold. On the court, veterans stepped up. Players like Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston took on bigger roles, proving they weren't just sidekicks in the Caitlin Clark show. The Fever started grinding out wins and even managed to stay in the playoff conversation. That resilience mattered because it showed the roster had depth and fight, even without their star. But here's the problem. No matter how hard they played, the spotlight wasn't there. The national broadcasts weren't promoting them, the headlines weren't being written about them, and the empty seats at away games told the story fans weren't showing up if Clark wasn't part of the package. So how did the Fever respond? Publicly, they kept their messaging positive. Coach Stephanie White repeated that shutting Clark down was about long-term health, not short-term pressure. Players refused to lash out at the league or the media circus. They carried themselves with professionalism, projecting calm in the middle of chaos. But behind the scenes, sources suggest the team was frustrated. They knew the chatter about Atlanta or other league interventions made them look powerless, like pawns in a bigger business game. And here's where it gets interesting. The Fever started leaning into a new identity. Instead of waiting for Clark's return, they began using the spotlight she left behind to highlight their grit, their chemistry, and their fight. Local fans rallied around the idea that the Fever were more than just Clark, showing up in Indiana even when national television ignored them. It was almost a rebellion against the narrative. While the league was panicking, the Fever were proving they could still play real basketball. If the league thought fans wouldn't notice the desperation, they were wrong, because the moment Caitlin Clark was shut down, The reaction from the public was immediate and brutal. Social media timelines lit up with anger, confusion, and disappointment. Fever fans in Indiana felt betrayed at even the hint their team could be pressured into leaving their home court. Some posted videos outside Gainbridge Fieldhouse demanding the league stop stealing our team, while others flooded comment sections with lines like, "We don't support a league that abandons its fans the moment ratings drop." Across Twitter and Reddit, the tone was even harsher. One viral post read, "No Clark, no ratings, no league. The WNBA just exposed how fragile it really island." Another said, "Atlanta? Really? This isn't basketball? This is desperation theater." These weren't fringe voices, they represented a groundswell of frustration that turned into a rallying cry. Fans wanted the Fever to stay put, and they wanted the league to stop chasing optics instead of loyalty. Meanwhile, the media wasn't holding back either. Sports talk shows began openly questioning the WNBA's leadership. Pundits debated whether the league had put too much weight on one rookie, setting itself up for collapse the moment she went down. ESPN segments openly compared the WNBA's panic to the NBA in the 1,980 seconds before Magic and Bird saved its ratings. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Can the WNBA survive without Caitlin Clark?" Sponsors and business analysts started quietly voicing concern that the product being sold wasn't the WNBA as a whole, but one player in particular. Even players across the league chimed in. Some defended Clark, admitting her impact was undeniable, but arguing the WNBA had to find ways to elevate everyone, not just her. Others felt the Atlanta rumors were disrespectful, reducing the Fever to a prop in the league's marketing machine. The tension grew because it exposed a harsh truth. Clark's shadow hung over every player, every team, every broadcast. The outrage wasn't just about Atlanta or ratings, it was about trust. Fans were asking, if the league can move the Fever once, what's stopping them from bending every rule to chase markets, sponsorships, or television numbers? That fear cut deep because it made the WNBA feel less like a sport and more like a show, a scripted performance where outcomes were secondary to headlines. And as the storm of criticism built, one reality became clear. If the WNBA didn't find a way to calm the backlash, it risked losing more than ratings. It risked losing credibility. But while fans were furious and the media tore the league apart, the bigger question looming over everything was simple. What happens next if the panic doesn't stop? When you strip away the noise, the outrage, and the rumors, one question towers over everything. What is really at risk if the WNBA continues down this path? The answer is simple but terrifying nearly everything. Start with the television deals. Networks like ESPN, ABC, and Amazon didn't buy into the league as a whole. They bought into the Caitlin Clark effect. They expected the spike in ratings to continue all year, translating into ad dollars, sponsorship packages, and a narrative of growth. But when those numbers fell by more than half after Clark went down, executives started asking whether they had overpaid for a product that couldn't stand without one player. If confidence erodes, so does leverage. The next round of negotiations for television rights could drop in value, leaving the league with less money to grow. Then there are the sponsors. Companies lined up to put Clark's face on their ads. Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, you name it. But here's the catch. When those deals are tied to one player, the league's health looks secondary. Sponsors start wondering if their investment is really in the WNBA or just in Caitlin Clark. If Clark misses time, moves overseas, or pulls back from endorsements, that spotlight dims, and suddenly the league is scrambling to prove it can deliver value beyond one superstar. Player morale is another risk no one wants to talk about. When athletes across the league see that everything ratings, coverage, money revolves around Clark, resentment brews. Some already hint that the obsession with Clark overshadows their own contributions, even when they're putting up big performances. And if the league appears willing to bend rules, move games, or shift entire franchises just to cover up her absence, what does that say to the other players grinding every night? It tells them they're expendable in the eyes of the business, and that's poison in a locker room.